Greetings everyone, hello. I'm sorry I couldn't be in school today. One of our little kids got sick. Shoot. So instead you get to watch this great video. And you like my headphones? Sweet. So here's the thing. Yesterday, if you're with us, you know that we looked at the first two systems of government. They're a unitary and a confederate system. It's all about who has the power, right? So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at a third system of government, and of course it's our system of government, which is federalism. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you have this note sheet from yesterday handy, because we're going to be kind of filling this in as we go. You might need to have two windows open on your Chromebook, but I'm sure you can figure out how to do that. And let's get to it. So federalism is, well, it's our system of government, and it works pretty well. If we had been in class together, I have these maps, and I was actually going to put these maps, give you each a copy of them. Whoops, here we go. And we were going to look at these and do some little analysis. So instead, I'll just kind of flip through them right now, and we can kind of see what we're looking at. So this is U.S. population by county, and then we have total immigration, so where immigrants are going and where the largest foreign-born populations were in various years. This one is the obesity rate by U.S. county. Yikes. This is public transportation use. You see a lot of big cities obviously have lots of public transportation use. Los Angeles, California, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Miami. You see that. This is percent of Americans in each county with a disability. Again, yikes, something going on down there in the South. And then this is high school graduation rates. And so the darker the color, the bluer, essentially, the higher the graduation rates, and the more tan or yellow, the lower graduation rates there are. Yikes. So questions that we were going to talk about if I'd been there were sort of like, what observations did you see? If you had been with a team of people, what conclusions could you draw about the United States? And to make a long story short, the goal of those maps is to sort of show that we are a very diverse country. We're a country that has many different types of people in many different places. And so what we need is a system of government that's going to allow us to meet the needs of our people, while also acknowledging that we're a big nation and we're a powerful nation, and so having a strong central government is also a necessity. And so what we find is we need a mix of what we saw yesterday. We need a mix of a bit of a confederacy with some elements of the Unitarian system of government. And so what we get, of course, is federalism. So we know what federalism is. It's a system of government where power is divided between two levels of government, usually a national, also known as a federal level, and state or regional governments. So this power is shared, and these two groups are allowed to have authority over certain issues, and they also are expected to, in some cases, submit to one another. It kind of goes both ways. So some examples are a lot of sort of what you consider allies of ours in Western nations, like Australia, Brazil, Canada, India, which is pretty cool. India is a big country, a lot of people, and of course us. So we've had different forms of federalism throughout our history. We used to have a very sort of equal standing between the national government and state governments, but it's evolved into a system where the states are definitely under the national level, but they're still expected to cooperate. So it was sort of equal. They just each had sort of separate roles, but now it's definitely a federal and then a state, two layers that are now expected to cooperate. So it's been a transition over time. That was a video. We're going to skip it. If you want to see the video, I think there's a link to it on the slideshow, and you can get that slideshow in our class materials folder. But basically it talks about our country. So let's talk about the pros and the cons of federalism. So there's lots of them that we could talk about. So there's 4 advantages and then I think 4 disadvantages. Yep, okay. So I don't want to spend forever on these, but for the sake of time, one cool thing about federalism is that it allows your national government to help unite your people, but also then allows the local governments, like states, to handle those local issues that are specific to them. So we saw on the maps at the beginning of the video, if you were paying attention, how some states have different issues than others. And so, for instance, Colorado, if you looked at that map closely, has a very low obesity rate. For whatever reason, the people of Colorado tend to be much more like healthy. But then other states like Mississippi have a much more severe issue with that problem. And so we need a local government, a local state governments to maybe handle those things, make laws about school lunches for little kids, make laws about, I don't know, health stuff. So the idea is that that state government is going to be able to handle that, and then other states don't have to worry about it if it doesn't pertain to them. Local governments are going to be more in touch with the people, and so they have to be more responsive to the people who elect them. So that's great. The central government can devote more time and energy to those national and international problems that concern the entire nation. They don't have to deal as much with local issues. They can save their energies and their manpower because they can trust that those local issues will be met by the local governments. And another advantage, there's going to be more opportunities for people like you and I to participate in government, because when you've got multiple levels of government, there's quite frankly multiple offices, multiple spots for people to run for office and become elected. So if when you have one system of government, when you have like a unitary system, there's only so many spots in government. But if you have multiple layers like this in federalism, it means, well, heck, I want to be the mayor. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'd be the town mayor. Or maybe, hey, I want to be the, a state representative. Or hey, let's go all the way to Washington, D.C. I want to be a U.S. senator. There's all kinds of different opportunities, which makes that democracy aspect pretty cool. Some downsides over here, you get duplication of services. That means, we talked about this yesterday, the idea is that if you have a national government providing you with certain services, you're also going to have some of those same services given to you by your state and even your local, like town governments. So law enforcement is an easy example where you have national law enforcement in the form of the FBI and other agencies. You also get state police, you get county police, and you often have city or town police as well. So that's like 4 layers of law enforcement, all working towards the same goal. And that's a downside. It's a lot of money and manpower and resources being spent on something that you might be able to accomplish with maybe just 1 or 2 layers. Okay. You're also going to see that with people living in such different parts of a country with different laws, they're going to be treated differently. There might be different penalties for law breaker people, for offensive people who break laws. Different priorities are going to lead to different government decisions. And those differences mean there's not consistent, uniform government presence in the areas that people live. Also, we're going to see that sometimes, I'm going to move my webcam over here. Thank you. We're also going to see that there can be disagreements between national government and state governments regarding things that these different levels of government want to accomplish. So that's what ultimately led to the Civil War, states' rights. And then finally, number 4, states can pass laws that can actually run counter to national policy in regards to international relationships. And so, for instance, there could be a state that wants to accept undocumented immigrants, for instance, from, say, Mexico, but that might be a violation of the official immigration policy of the national government. That's problematic. And again, that relates to the 3rd disadvantage, but that's a bit more of a specific example. So, question. We talk about federalism in this country, and we also know by now that our government system is called a democracy. And what we see is that federalism works really well with democracies. So the question is, why? Well, to answer the question, we need to point out a couple things again about America. America is a democracy, but it's a specific kind of democracy. It's a federal democracy. So to remind you what a democracy is here, it's a form of government in which eligible citizens are meant to participate and elect leaders. So that means you are, when you're of the right age, you vote, and you get to help decide the leaders for your country, and you're expected to participate in your communities, which is kind of why we assigned that participation project, which is due in May. Don't forget about that. So what's cool is that this works really well in federalism, because having multiple levels of government allows, like we said, for more citizens to serve in government. It also allows those local leaders to keep in touch with what their people need. And it allows us to let states try new things. A great example would be state governments like in Colorado and Washington and Alaska, and then I think also Washington, D.C. I should probably know that for a fact, where things like recreational marijuana use is now legal, as long as you have a certain age and you follow certain regulations. That is, for many people, very controversial, and something that many people don't want to happen to the whole nation. So what we see is that these states can experiment with this, try it out, see how it impacts the people of their state, and if it totally backfires, then we can say, okay, everybody learned a lesson, let's not do that in the whole nation. But if it works, for whatever reason, then we can say, okay, then this is perhaps something that could be expanded to the larger nation overall. So we have these laboratories of democracy. We're going to allow the states to experiment with new things, see how it works, and kind of be a test run before we implement them on a nationwide scale. Now, because you have two levels of government, you have two very powerful groups, and so it gets a little complicated here how we divide which powers and what names we give it all. So to run through all of this, we need to remind everyone that there's some powers listed in the Constitution given to Congress in Article 1. And it says the powers, also I should say, and it says that whatever powers aren't listed in the Constitution for the national government, those powers that aren't listed for the national government are left up to states to handle. And that's what it says in the 10th Amendment. It says, powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So basically we can do this with a Venn diagram. So you have a group of powers called the national powers. These are the ones that are delegated in the Constitution to the U.S. federal government. You also have then state powers that are written down and reserved for the states. And then there's some overlap. There's powers that are what we call concurrent. These are things that both the national government and state governments get to do. Things like tax their people, penalize people who break laws, make laws, that kind of thing. So anyway, let's kind of wrap this up. Just one quick reminder again. So when we have powers, going back a slide, that are delegated to the national government over here, remember, even those powers get broken down into two groups. The enumerated ones, the ones that are written down in the Constitution, and then the implied powers, the ones that we assume the national government gets to do in order to accomplish the enumerated powers. That should be reviewed, though, because we learned that when we talked about the U.S. Constitution. That's in the powers of Congress. So that's kind of it. Thank goodness, right? Now, there's a little bit more work for you to do. And so what you're going to be doing here is you got to take a quiz. So there's a quiz. It's quiz 206. It's called Systems of Government. So if you would go back to Canvas and click on that, it should open up. I hope it does. You can take it twice, as always. And then once you're done with that, there is another homework assignment that's going to get you to look at some of these enumerated versus implied powers. And there's a link. If you click on that in the Canvas, it should open it up. Please just follow the directions. It should be pretty self-explanatory. It's going to open up a document that looks like this. And for each enumerated power listed on the left column, I want you to just brainstorm, pure brainstorming. You don't have to know it. Just come up with a couple or three examples of what might be some implied powers. In other words, things that Congress has to be able to do, we assume, in order to accomplish the enumerated power. Okay? Once you're done with that, go back to Canvas and submit it, and that'll be how I collect it. Thanks, everybody. I hope this video works. I apologize, and I'll see you tomorrow. So long.